Welcome to Stop to Sell, the space where we pause to think, to reflect, and to sell better. Today's episode is about something that quietly defines success or failure in sales, onboarding and training. Because most companies don't lose salespeople due to lack of talent, they lose them due to lack of structure, clarity, and support. A poor onboarding creates confusion. A strong onboarding creates confidence, autonomy, and consistency. And to help us explore this topic, I'm joined by someone with a deep international experience in sales, leadership, and business development, Mafalda Johannesen. Hi, Mafalda.
Hi, Eduardo. Nice to be here.
Look, Mafalda, nice to meet you again because we have already been in my Portuguese podcast. I know that you have worked across different markets, cultures, and high performance environments. And in this conversation, we will explore what great onboarding really looks like, how to accelerate learning without burning people out, and how to build confident, ethical, and high performance sales professionals. So it's a pleasure to have you here. Mafalda, who are you? Do you want to introduce yourself?
Absolutely. It's a pleasure to be here again, now in English. So my name is Mafalda. I'm Portuguese, living in Berlin for the last 11 years. I also study in the United States. I actually started my sales career there. So I started in sales because no one else would hire me at the time. I didn't know I wanted to work in sales.
Okay,
I was
okay.
commission, but I really had no other choice. And then I realized it's actually a profession for me here. And 15 years later, I'm still here in the profession, even though I've worked for different industries, SaaS, technology, media, tourism. I've had also different jobs, from operations manager to marketing to customer success to business development, leadership. So I've done a lot of different things. I haven't had a linear career, let's put this way, but I also think it's one of my strengths as well, because I think I have this high level overview on every single revenue department. And just recently, I've launched a sales book, prospecting book in Portuguese,
Yes,
the help of AI, and that's actually how we met, right, Eduardo?
yes, that's how we met. That's the reason I'm always looking for news and new books in sales, and that's the way I have discovered you. And after that, we are always keeping in touch. And this is recorded, so it is important to be said. Most of the guests and the invited that I have in my podcast, I need to thank you because you have introduced me to them. So thanks a lot, Mafalda.
My pleasure, my pleasure.
Okay, Mafalda, looking at your international career that you have said you are in Germany, but you were in the United States. What has most shaped your view on sales onboarding?
I think it's not having an onboarding. That was what shaped my view on onboarding. So, as I mentioned, my first job in the States, as I mentioned, I didn't want to work in sales. I didn't know anything about it. I don't think I have a natural talent, so to say. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
and because the company would only pay you 100% commission, so they would
Okay,
base salary, nothing, basically social security, health insurance, forget nothing. um, they didn't care if you made it or not, right? So it's like those who are natural talents, they will make it. The others, well, if they don't sell, we don't pay them anyway, so no risk. And so I had basically one afternoon of training, right? And
okay,
I just came back from my master's. I didn't work much before, definitely not in sales. And I had an afternoon of training, and then good luck. Um, and I
that's
think,
great.
yeah. And I have to say that the the reason why I still made it was because my dear colleagues, they were helping me, and they gave me a lot of tips on the job, and they kind of trained me out of their
Mhm.
goodwill and good heart. So that's how I got into it. And then in other companies that I after worked for, there was basically almost no onboarding or a very poor one, and
Mhm.
you had to learn a lot from your mistakes, which is fine if you have time for it. But when you
Mhm.
start losing targets, losing money, getting the pressure, it would be much nicer if you could learn in the onboarding all the mistakes or a lot of them, and then start performing as soon as possible, meaning in sales, in the sales world, reducing the ramp time for you, because it's less frustrating. You start making money sooner, you are happier sooner, and for
Yes.
the company, obviously. So the longer the ramp time, the more revenue the company is losing. And that's why
Mhm.
onboarding and training are crucial for your revenue success, right?
Okay. Okay. Well, you talk in a, in an important point. It is the ramp. Okay. When I started this in sales, the ramp in that sector, it is 1 year.
Yep, it's a lot.
1 year. Okay. I worked with insurance, credit insurance. Okay. And after 6 months, I didn't have one sale. And I thought, well, I am terrible in this. And I worked like you 100% in commissions. But after that, people told me, okay, slow down, Eduardo, no pressure, because you are doing everything right. It's not your problem, it's the ramp. Okay. And I think that it is important for that. I think when you start your onboarding, it is important that people told you how to do things, but what are the expectations they have with you.
Absolutely. And you should have targets for ramp time and targets when
Mhm.
out of ramp, right? So that's also important that the companies have different targets depending if you are in or out of the ramp time, for sure.
Yes, of course. In your experience, Mafalda, and I hope that you have worked with better onboarding experience than the first one. What is the most common mistake companies make when integrating new salespeople?
Yeah. So I think a common mistake I see, it's
Mhm.
overload a waterfall of useless information. And when I mean useless, it doesn't mean it's useless period, is useless in that moment in time, right?
Yes.
So basically, you know studies say, it's not even me, there are studies that show that 70% or 80% of what you learn in the onboarding, you will forget afterwards. So that time was actually wasted. Why? Because you learn a lot of theory for
Mhm.
2 weeks, a month, depending on the company, and then when you have to start applying, you already forgot because it was like 3 weeks ago, right?
Yes.
So it's really important that the onboarding comes. So the onboarding should be just the 2 weeks of information, and then there you go, like good luck. You should
Mhm.
onboard and start working already while you're onboarding, because then you don't forget how to do things, the tasks, and you can apply the theory right away. And
Okay.
I think that's definitely something that most of the onboardings that I've reviewed, because I reviewed over 300 onboardings or maybe even more, because once I worked for a company that we offered that service, reviewing and improving onboarding paths. And I think
Mhm.
this one of the most common mistakes I've seen. It's like, Jesus, after the first week, your new hire is so overwhelmed, we'll forget almost everything.
That's true. So, according to you, the initial onboarding or the initial training, Okay, let's focus in the initial training. Should the main focus be on product, process, or mindset?
All of them, but I would say buyer persona. That's for me the most important. That's another common mistake I see is
Mm-hmm.
companies putting a lot of focus on product or service, which again it's relevant and you should focus on that. But what I see is a lot of focus on that and zero on the buyer persona, on the client. So I would
Okay.
say that definitely mindset, but I would go with product and buyer persona first, and
Okay.
context, right? So understanding the context, your industry, your competitors, understanding the context first, and then
Mm.
so go generic, and then from general you go specific, right? And I think that really helps the new salesperson to understand where he or she is at, and how to go from there.
Yes, I agree. I think, well, I don't know in the markets that you have worked before, but in Portugal, it is very common when you hire a salespeople, say something like, okay, you are going the first week, you will be with the all salespeople that we have, and well, you are going to learn in this way.
Yeah, shadowing without any structure. Yeah.
That happens in another countries that you have worked to.
Half. Usually that happens on the second or third week after you got a lot of theory. But
Okay.
still, imagine you are 2 weeks full of theory and also full of a lot of HR procedures that are not really relevant in that moment in time. You don't need to know how to ask holidays until you actually need to ask holidays. So why am I learning that in my first week? I can learn that whenever I feel like, you know, putting them in the process. So it's not only the information about your job, but the whole information about the company, right? So
Okay.
after you are dumped with a lot of useless information in that point in time, you then start shadowing your colleagues in an unstructured way, and a lot of them they don't like it because they are focused on hitting their targets. That being said, it's super important that you shadow calls, but you can also listen to them, right? I think companies should record their calls for many reasons, for training,
Hmm.
for data, for everything. So that's also a good way is to have the recordings and share them with the newbie, but also with the structure, right? So tell the newbie what he or she should be looking for in the call, which part should they pay attention, right? So they actually have some structure when they look at the call and not just here 500 calls, have fun, take your own conclusions.
Yes, and well, that's a little strange how the things still work right now. But well, I think that we are still using the same methods that we used in the 80s or 90s. Well, it's like that we haven't learned with the mistakes before.
No, 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 it's true. And there is a podcast in English from Todd Caponi, which is
Hmm.
sales history, something. It's from Todd Caponi. It's basically, he talks about sales in the beginning of the 20th century, stories and
Okay.
stuff. And it's like, when you hear that, I was like, oh, nothing has changed.
Okay, okay. So, according to you, what is the role of the direct manager in a successful onboarding?
So the manager really needs, I think, apart from the HR, bureaucracy, I think it should be really the manager to build the onboarding path. And I think that's not a nice to have. And if the manager cannot make time for it, then I'm questioning what is he or she making time for if it's not trained
Mhm.
their team. So the manager should be the one building the onboarding, and the manager has to make sure that the person um, know, like that in the onboarding the person learns everything they need to be successful in the first weeks, right?
Okay.
So focus, okay, if I want for example, if it's a BDR and STR, if I want this person to book calls, book meetings by the third week or even second, what does he or she need to know in order to do that? And then work backwards. And every piece of information should be coming with an exercise that's practical, right? So I learned my ICP, I learned my persona, then I'm going to build a list based on this. That's a practical exercise. Okay, I've built the list, I have prospects. Now I learned their challenges, right? And how to write a good email. Okay, then send that email to one person in the list already built. Okay, now you learn how to do a cold call. Okay, cold call the person that you already sent an email that it's already in your list, and you build from there, right? So in that makes you not only learn on the spot, learn with your manager really guiding you through all the process, and if you're lucky enough, you can book a call with that person. Like I've had in my life people already booking more than one call in their second week, because they've been prospecting with my help on the side. And then I can leave them alone because they've been through the whole process with me. They already, and then they will remember, they won't forget, maybe one detail or two, but then,
Yes.
practice makes perfection.
Okay, I do believe in that. I do believe in that. So, you have already worked in several tech and SaaS environment. What changed most in sales training in that environment?
I think that the fundamentals are all the same, which is please learn your buyer persona and your ICP.
Okay.
I think the nuances come more from the product side and the way, in the way the industry works, right? So, for example, I've worked in a SaaS company where my target persona was heads of sales enablement, commercial people.
Yes.
And I've worked in companies where my target markets were CTOs, heads of infrastructure. So the fundamentals are, I need to understand the buyer persona, right? That doesn't change. But what changes is the product, their challenges, and the way they like to communicate. So, for example, a very specific example, if I send a link to a head of sales, the likelihood of he or she open that link, it's higher than a CTO, because a CTO or someone in tech is more aware of viruses, of phishing, right? So they won't click on links of people they don't trust and they don't know, right? So as a salesperson, you need to know. So maybe instead of sending a video to a CTO while prospecting per email, maybe send on LinkedIn, where there are no problems with videos because the video is embedded, so it doesn't carry videos out, or a voice message. The voice message doesn't carry a virus, right? So you really need to understand these nuances. For example, if a CTO likes a prospecting email, the next thing the person will do will be looking at your company website. It's not replying to you, and you need to know that. Whereas a salesperson most likely replies to the email saying, yeah, tell me more, right? Because, I don't feel like going to the website. I prefer talking. But then a CTO most likely would actually check the website, have the objections in his or her head without replying to you. So he or she does the whole objection handling while looking at your website, and you have no clue because the person didn't reply to you. So you don't know if they opening, you can know, but you don't know if they liked it, if they didn't, why they're not replying. You know nothing, right? And that's why it's important to have also multi-threading. So the salesperson needs to understand how the buyer persona behaves and act accordingly. And those are the nuances between industries or personas. But the fundamentals are there. You need to learn your product and your buyer persona and your environment.
Okay. Look, Mafalda, well, I like I work with several companies in training, and well, I can see like two different generations, and well, I do believe that now we are having a more common behavior, and it is, well, I want to learn, I do want training, I want the training but well, there is a small group, probably older, that just see the continuous training like another obligation.
Yeah.
Okay, how we can avoid that the training is just becoming another obligation and calendar obligation.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. It was for me as well a couple of years ago, because I
Mm-hmm,
that the sales enabler at that company at the time, he was not good, and I was learning nothing with him. So for me,
mm-hmm,
even though I was young and eager to learn, for me that slot on my calendar was a time waster, and that's how I saw it. um so for me, I think adults, especially when time is money, which is literally what happens in sales, we really need to want to see the ROI on that hour,
of
right?
course.
So if I see, okay, in 1 hour I can make 30 cold calls, right? So why would I be wasting my time with a training that won't help me? And that's the
Mm-hmm,
key. So you need to have the buy-in from your salespeople. They need to see that that hour or that half an hour is well invested. That after that hour they will feel more comfortable in selling, or that that will make their lives easier. And
mm-hmm,
so at the beginning, so basically the training should be decided based on data and qualitative feedback, right? So
of
where
course.
where do your salespeople feel they have more difficulties, right?
Mm-hmm,
And tackle that. So don't give a training, a random training based on nothing just to add to a checklist. That's not
mm-hmm,
okay. So make sure that that training is actually necessary and it's a skill that actually needs improvement. And
okay,
then show that to your team. Okay, the reason why we're giving this training is based on this data, on your feedback. That's why it's needed, and this is what we want to accomplish with it, right? So in the end of the training, if we accomplished, or if they accomplished on their week after, their month after, what we decided we would with the training, then they will have the buy-in. So for example, in my previous company,
mm-hmm,
I gave training on video prospecting. And then the
okay,
next day, I was lucky, but the next day, one of my BDRs, he booked a meeting with video. So when that happens, I was like, okay, that training was not a waste of time. Without that training, I would have put this call, right? And you just need one, because if the others see that he booked a meeting, then I was like,
mm-hmm,
okay, then it works. Let me try. So it's really important that you also see tangible results from the training.
of course, of course, of course. There is an important, I'm trying to see. Okay, there is an important issue that I think, according to these days, that it is very difficult to hire people, but maintain people in our structure. How can culture, values be integrated into sales training?
Yeah. I think maintaining
Because I'm sorry, because for this generation, these values and culture is very, very important.
yeah,
It's not just the salary, how much I can earn in the end of the month.
yeah, and it should be right.
Yes.
I think I'm millennial, and I think it was important for us, but because most of the promises were not made, we just became cynical, or maybe I'm just talking about myself. So
Mm-hmm.
for me, a company starts saying, "Oh, we are very inclusive. We're this, we're that." I'm like, "Yeah, sure," and that's my attitude towards that and towards life. But
Mm-hmm.
then the Gen Z finally is like, "No, no, no, no. You say you must." You must comply, you must do. And I think that while my generation, got a bit cynical, they are really trying to make the companies work for them, which I think is great. And I think that the companies, what they should do to keep the people motivated is actually show that their values are true, right? So
Okay.
and I think, like, for example, and my next book is about that, by the way.
Okay,
My
Mafalda.
next book is a graphic novel about all the BS that happens in companies, and companies not walking the talk. um,
Okay.
so if the company praises themselves that they are a great employer, then they cannot
Mm-hmm.
pay their employees below average, right? So, you
Okay.
cannot be a great employer if, your employees can barely pay their bills, right? Or you cannot say that you are a flexible company and then you make your employees going 4 days to an office. Then it's not flexible, right? You cannot say that you value merit when the person who does the list is the one who gets promoted and the one who is getting the results is not, which happens a lot. So you need to walk the talk, and that's something that
Okay.
has to change, right? Or you can
Mm-hmm.
say that you believe in people's development and career development, and one, not offering it or not offering training, and that answers your training question, right? So the training should be the base for you to be good at your job, but also to go to the next step, right? To
Okay.
for you to develop yourself, and the company that praises that should offer that, right? If you don't, you don't, right? If you say, look, that's not in our values, fine, I knew that when I signed up for it. So, but
I
if you
agree.
say that, then you should do it. Otherwise, you cannot maintain your people. They will be very disappointed.
Yes, I do agree, Mafalda. Look, let's go to another topic: coaching versus training.
Yes.
Where does one end and the other begin?
I think it depends a lot from person to person, but I think
Mm-hmm.
training is broader, right? And coaching is
Okay.
for the individual, right? So, and
Mm-hmm.
and I do that as that distinction as well with my teams. So I give, for example, email training or biopersona training for my whole team, and then I
Okay.
coach one individually because people are
Mm-hmm.
different, right? So, for example, I had once a BDR. He was amazing at cold calling. I'm not going to give him training or coaching on cold calling. That's a time waster for him. Then I'm not going to do that, right? So just I'd rather he having him half an hour cold calling the people and booking meetings, right? So basically, for me, that's the difference. In the training, it's broader and it's for everyone,
Mm-hmm.
based on data, as I mentioned. So we find a common theme that needs to improve across the team, and then coaching is individually, right? And that is different
Okay.
because each person has a different motivation, each person has
Okay.
a different strength and a different weakness, and you
Mm-hmm.
you should coach more on that. For me, that's a big difference. But I think both training and coaching, they both belong to the same umbrella, right?
Okay. Okay. For me, it is a little different.
Hmm.
Okay. And for me, when I am training, I am saying what to do. When I am coaching, I am asking how do you think we can do and
Yeah,
why do you think we can do in that way,
yeah, yeah,
with rules, trying to do that according to the culture company, of course, of course. But I think if you want short-term results, of course, training. But if you want to transform behaviors,
yeah.
need to coach.
Absolutely, absolutely,
Do
absolutely. But
you agree with me?
I think yours is basically in the agreement with mine, right? Because with coaching, when I say it's individual, it's because I tailor that to the person, and it's a longer
Of
term.
course. I
So yeah,
okay.
I think our definitions are complement each other actually.
Yeah, I think they are cousins. They are from the
Yes,
same family.
absolutely, absolutely.
Okay. So, Mafalda, imagine that you are going to design the ideal onboarding today.
Yeah.
Okay. Which three pillars would be non negotiable?
Okay, I would say the first one would be really theory with practice. So if there is
Okay.
exercise after the theory, then the theory is gone, and that's
Mm-hmm.
not negotiable. And practice can just be, for example, if I show you a buyer persona interview, I can say, please write to me 3 challenges, right? So it can be something like this.
Okay.
So if there is no practice, there is no theory. That's the first
Mm-hmm.
pillar. The second one, it's if it's not relevant now, then we don't add to it. We add whenever it's.
Okay.
And the third one is it's really the third one would be really focusing on buyer persona. I don't see that enough. Like the
Okay.
buyer in most companies, the buyer persona is one cheat sheet, one A4 sheet saying, a CTO doesn't like bugs. Oh, really?
I understand. I understand what you say, and the most scary it is that when I am training a group of salespeople, and when I am developing the ICP, I see like the eyes shining in professionals that are in the company like 2 years or
Yeah,
3 years.
yeah,
And suddenly they think, oh, it's not so narrow, our market. It's more open than I imagined before.
yeah,
And I'm not telling what they should search. I'm just asking questions.
yeah.
And I do believe what you said, that if they design first the buyer person, if they know what is buyer person, it will be more open since the beginning.
Yeah, 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 for sure.
But
For
the
sure.
problem is that, Mafalda, it is, well, you are going to be with this guy and you are going to learn with him. So suddenly, if that guy just like one single market, that is what they are going to learn.
And that's why it should be the manager doing the onboarding, not the best salesperson. The best
Of
the
course.
person should be shadowing. Like it's important to listen to calls and see how the best people do, but it's after you understand the structure. Also because what works for me might not work for you, right? So the structure is super important, and then you do whatever you like within your personality and company culture.
Mm-hmm. 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 Look, Mafalda, we have already finished.
That was
I
fast.
want, that's true. Mafalda, thank you for this conversation.
No, thank you so much for
Please
having me.
write more books because I have more episodes for my podcast to record. I
All
need
right, all
I
right.
need that books
We're gonna
for
talk
more
about graphic
conversations.
novels in the next one. No,
Okay,
we can talk about toxic company cultures. That's the topic of my next book. So we
okay,
can
that's a
do an
great
episode.
topic. That's a great topic. I wanted to be the number one podcast interviewing you about the new book.
Deal,
And if
and it's
you,
official. It's already.
okay, it's recording.
Yeah,
It's
exactly.
recording.
I cannot go back to it. It's the whole world is seeing this.
Okay. So, Mafalda, a little talk about this. What becomes clear is that onboarding is not a HR process. It's a strategic leadership responsibility. Onboarding is where habits are formed. It is where standards are set, and it is where confidence is either built or destroyed.
Yeah.
So, before we close, let me leave you with today's stop to sell action plan. Okay. So, if you lead a sales team, ask yourself 3 questions this week. First one, do my new salespeople know exactly what the good performance looks like in practice? Do they know which is our buyer persona? And do they feel supported while learning? Okay, that's the 3 questions that I want you ask yourself during this week. And remember, training builds skills, onboarding builds identity, and identity drives behavior. So, Mafalda, once again, thank you for sharing your experience and your insights with us. Thanks a
Thank you
lot,
so
Mafalda.
much. Thank you so much.
Bye bye.